So we've seen our fair share of bad lawyering here at Law&Crime, just maybe not to this level. Now imagine you're a lawyer trying to get out of going to a trial. You think of every possibility, maybe a continuance. None makes sense, except to kill. Yes, it seems very far-stretched, right? Well, according to prosecutors, not for this divorce attorney in Ohio.
This defendant, Your Honor, planned this ahead of time, obtained the means with which he did this crime. Those means are also means that he used to avoid leaving evidence of his crime.
Thanks for joining us here on Law&Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner. Gregory Moore, the former Ohio divorce attorney at the center of this chilling crime, was indicted 12 years after Aliza Sherman's murder. Now, he was kept in jail for months, that is, until a judge granted him a $2 million bond. This was Gregory Moore just a few weeks ago.
Good morning, Mr. Moore.
Good morning, Your Honor.
He went from representing clients to being the client, well, really, the defendant. But to understand the change-up, you really have to go back to 2013. According to prosecutors, that was the year his then-client, Aliza Sherman, was brutally stabbed to death outside of his office. Now, before we get into the gruesome, gory details, let's talk about Aliza Sherman. Aliza, according to many reports, was a beloved woman, nurse, friend, and mom. And she went to Gregory Moore in the first place because she was stuck in the middle of a super messy divorce. She filed back in 2011, and by March of 2013, her divorce was supposed to head to trial. But the same week the matter was supposed to go to court, Aliza was brutally murdered. According to court documents, on Sunday, March 24th of 2013, Aliza was planning to meet with her attorney. At 2:31 p.m. that day, Gregory texted her to meet at his office around 4:30 that afternoon. At 3:54 p.m., Aliza texted she was on the way. Gregory reportedly responded that she could take her time. He'll be closer to 5 anyway. Aliza texted back, "I left. We'll wait. Call me when you get there." According to the indictment, Gregory never intended for a meeting to even happen because, unknown to Aliza, Gregory was already at his office building. Around 4:15, Gregory called her. She didn't answer. Then a few minutes later, Aliza texted, "Sorry, couldn't get phone. Got here quicker than I thought. Let me know when you are here. I will wait in my car. No problem." And she did just that. Waited and waited and waited. Prosecutors say from 4:23 p.m. to 7:32 p.m., Gregory disconnected his phone from the Verizon cellular network, but still managed to text her, likely using the law office mobile hotspot. So around 5:13 that evening, Aliza messaged him, "Will you be here soon? Standing outside building. If not, we'll go back to my car." A minute later, a similar message from Aliza. "Will you be here soon? Kind of cold." Gregory texted back, "Been here." Aliza responded, "Doors locked. I thought you would text me when you got here. Been in car 45 minutes. It's okay. How do I get in?" A couple minutes later from that text, Aliza followed up. "If you are here, why don't you let me in? I guess I will go back to my car. Too cold. Text me when doors open. Thanks." That would be the final message sent from Aliza to her attorney, because around this time frame, a person approached Aliza, circled behind her, and chased her down several blocks, then stabbed her more than 10 times before just running off and leaving her there to die. According to prosecutors, this masked person you see on the surveillance was either Gregory Moore or an unknown co-conspirator. Even if this story wasn't scary enough, the motive behind Aliza's murder was even more horrific. Prosecutors say Gregory killed her because he was just unprepared to try her case and would likely not be granted another delay. Now, you might be thinking, messy divorce, why wasn't the suspect the husband? Well, let's fast forward to 2025. It's been 12 years since Aliza's murder. Gregory Moore has already been indicted and he's behind bars. And one of the prosecutors tells the judge all the reasons Gregory Moore is their prime suspect.
That evidence that he sought ahead of time to not leave behind is the same evidence that clears the person that everyone thinks did this crime, which is Aliza Sherman's husband. He did not. And this defendant sought for, after this crime, he lied to the police, he hid evidence from the police, he got rid of the phone that he used to commit this crime with, and he has lived for 12 years amongst us with everyone believing the husband did this, and that's not true. This case is about evidence, and the evidence in this case shows the defendant planned ahead of time to lure Aliza Sherman to his office, to keep her there under the guise of him being in the office, and he wasn't, and for him or someone working with him to come up and stab her. After the crime happened, this defendant was aided by people who then tried the next morning to get rid of the electronic means that he used. 21 minutes of video footage were missing from inside the building that should have captured this crime, but didn't. And then voicemails that Aliza left when she was at the call box were deleted before the police could get to them. All of these things are to show this defendant planned this crime and then committed the crime. We consider him to be a threat to public safety as well, because when the court system has required him to do his job as a lawyer, he responded with criminal activities, calling in bomb threats to 3 separate courthouses on days when he was supposed to be working there, coming up with illnesses and medical excuses to get out of going to court, a single car crash to keep him out of court, and then this. So, Your Honor, we ask this court implement the $2 million bond, reserving the right, of course, to ask for higher or potentially no bond in the future.
I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this story. Odoo is a powerful all-in-one business software that helps you manage everything from sales to accounting and, yes, manufacturing. Schedule your production, manage your assembly line, and fine-tune your work orders with Odoo all-in-one easy-to-use platform. Need fully assembled manufacturing software that'll put your business ahead of schedule? Well, Odoo has you covered. Plus, Odoo's manufacturing app syncs seamlessly with your sales, inventory, and purchasing modules, so everything stays connected and running smoothly. Check out Odoo to take your manufacturing process to the next level and get a free 15-day trial today at odoo.com/lcnewsmanufacturing. So that argument was made in late May of this year, and by early July, Gregory Moore walked out of the Cuyahoga County Jail. But he's not off scot-free. He had to pay $2 million in bond. Now, overall, he pleaded not guilty to aggravated murder, conspiracy, murder, and kidnapping. He's set to appear in court again this week, but now prosecutors seem upset about another issue. Not only was Gregory Moore released from jail, but now the court is putting a lot of faith into this defendant because he's now without a GPS monitoring device. So according to a report by Cleveland.com, prosecutors were unaware Gregory Moore's bond condition didn't include an ankle monitor, and they filed an emergency request for tighter restrictions. So I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney Serena Townsend. Serena, always great to see you. Have you seen something like this before where a murder defendant is out on bond without a GPS monitor?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you. I've not, the highest levels of precautions must be taken in cases like this. And, we always say it's not only about the degree of the alleged crime, it's also about the reliability of the person to come back to court. And we know that his MO has been, even in just his profession, to avoid going to court. So this was shocking to me.
And why is it that prosecutors possibly didn't seem to ask for a monitor during a previous bond hearing?
This seems like an oversight to me, or an over-reliance on the fact that bail was set so high. But in actuality, $2 million is not that high for this level of crime. And it's also not that high knowing that this man is a professional. I mean, he could have access to a decent amount of money rather than, your typical unfortunate situation where somebody is not a professional. Somebody does not have access to that amount of money. So I think it was an oversight by them and by the judge, and it's something that better be rectified.
Yeah, and I think it's possible, too, that they weren't expecting him to post a $2 million bond, too, because to your point, it does seem like a large amount of money. But for him, as he's having, I guess, some people who believe in his innocence also contributing to that payment, I can understand why it was a little dicey and why he's now just walking free pending trial. So Aliza Sherman's murder was about 12 years ago. Gregory Moore wasn't indicted for her murder, until this year. But do you think that he's a flight risk?
I do. Based on what we know about him, it does seem like he tries to avoid going to court, even on his professional cases, even on the cases where he's simply representing somebody else. So if he's got cold feet as an attorney going to court, I imagine his feet are even colder on a case where he could be held liable and go to prison for the rest of his life. So I think he's actually one of the worst flight risks that we've seen in local news coverage on these types of cases. I really am shocked that only $2 million was set and that no other restrictions were put upon him.
Yeah. And let's go into kind of his shady past of trying to get out of cases, get out of trials, all of that stuff. Because according to prosecutors, he would make up illnesses to get out of court. He even called in bomb threats at various different points just to not go into the courthouse. But do you think it's possible that, given all of that, given his kind of shady past, do you think it's possible he can stay out of trouble while he's out on bond?
I think that it's unlikely that he'll stay out of trouble in every way. I mean, I don't think he's going to necessarily commit a crime of the magnitude that he's alleging to have committed, that being murder. Would he do that again? Maybe not. But fleeing, not coming back, essentially criminal contempt of court, meaning not following court orders, not showing up. I do think it's possible, in fact, likely. He has supporters who believe in his innocence. Who knows how far they'll go to try to protect him from accountability. So I do think that, people should be very wary of his actions while he's out.
Yeah, and I know the defense was kind of bringing up that he was arrested back in Texas, but it wasn't for a flight risk issue. It's because he was trying to tend to his ailing father, who I guess was on his deathbed, according to his defense attorneys. But I'm curious, Serena, what are your thoughts on the motive of this case? Gregory Moore allegedly killed Aliza because he was unprepared to go to trial, which sounds kind of preposterous given that he is an attorney himself. But just, I think back to just how horrific her murder was, to be stabbed multiple times, all because she just wanted to get a divorce from her husband. She went to her divorce attorney for just that, what his job was. Then this happens. What are your thoughts about this motive that prosecutors allege?
I mean, like you said, it is preposterous. I have never heard of somebody killing another person to avoid court as an attorney. I mean, it's just, you can't even make this up. I've never heard of it in my life. I mean, something like this is usually a crime of passion. She's allegedly stabbed multiple times in this horrific manner. Usually that's not because of a lawyer who's scared to go to court. Usually it's because of the ex-husband that this lawyer was supposed to be protecting her from. So it's the irony and the viciousness of the crime is almost unheard of. I've really never encountered this in my life and in my practice. I'm just shocked.
Yeah, and I know to your point, Serena, that a lot of people always assume it's the husband, it's the boyfriend, it's the loved one, it's somebody kind of close to the victim. But it seems that prosecutors kind of allege that there's no possible way that the ex-husband or the estranged husband had anything to do with this. And it seems like prosecutors have a lot of evidence they're kind of working with. They have the text messages. Gregory turned off his Verizon cellular spot. He communicated on a mobile hotspot instead. And then he even previously spent 180 days in jail for providing false information to authorities. So what do you make of just this overwhelming kind of evidence that kind of is pointing to Gregory Moore allegedly being behind this?
Yeah, it does explain the length of time between the incident itself, the alleged incident, and the arrest. Usually, it's true. There's a little checklist of people that you would expect it to be. Detectives are like, all right, first guy out, it's got to be the ex-husband or the ex-husband to be. That's typically who it is. It's typically someone known to the person. Maybe somebody's had a fight with a person in the past, a rival. There might be insurance or money, involved. And that's probably where the mindset was right out the gate, especially if it's a contentious divorce. I mean, things happen even in seemingly happy marriages. So I'm sure that the attention was not drawn upon her own attorney, her own advocate, the person who she hired to help her. I'm sure that the attention was only brought there once the evidence came forward and the pieces of the puzzle were kind of fitting. So it takes time to collect that kind of evidence against somebody who's not your typical suspect. And it's important for a prosecutor to be able to prove, obviously beyond a reasonable doubt, that this is the person. As crazy as it sounds, as preposterous as the motive is, they have to overcome that to a jury. And so they have to build a rock solid case in this instance.
And we've seen cases that have been tried years and years and sometimes even decades after the original crime was committed. But how difficult is it for prosecutors to try a case 13 years after a murder? Because by the time Gregory Moore goes on trial, it'll be 13 years after Aliza Sherman was found dead. She was found dead in 2013. His trial's going on in 2026. How difficult do you think it could be for prosecutors to make their case beyond a reasonable doubt?
Typically, when things take this long, it assists the defense and it's detrimental to the prosecution. However, in this situation, a lot of the reasons why it's normally detrimental to the prosecution doesn't necessarily apply. Usually, when time passes, people's memories fade. And if the prosecution was relying on eyewitnesses or stranger testimony from somebody who might have observed this, who doesn't, know the person and made an identification, those are things that fade, and a defense attorney could really hammer home those points on cross-examination. However, data doesn't forget. And so if they're building their case, which it sounds like they are, off of circumstantial evidence, like the pulling of data from cell phones, text messages, surveillance video, that stuff doesn't fade with time. The only other thing that they're going to need to contend with in a weird psychological way is sometimes jurors don't care as much when cases are older. It's a weird thing. It's a shocking, horrific crime. And you would think, that people would be so upset about it. But as we see in other types of cases too, in other types of trials, we do see, even in the Diddy case, right? As time goes on, sometimes jurors are like, this happened so long ago, they're just not as into it. But I do think that overall, the balance here, a jury is going to, think about this case very seriously and hopefully take into account the data that's been collected and the evidence that has not faded.
And it seems like, because obviously you're a criminal defense attorney now, but it seems like the defense does kind of have a lot working in their favor, to your point too, where they have the time that's on their side. They have their defendant who is now out on bond right now. But in terms of just other things that are kind of working in the defense's favor that maybe you would use if you were trying this case or you were defending this client, I should say, what are your thoughts overall in terms of what you would do if you were to be handling this case on behalf of the defense?
It's a great question. I think what you hammer home is how many people can come up here on this stand and testify, that's the guy who did it, I saw him do it. If the answer is zero, then, there's a problem with the prosecution. There is reasonable doubt. I would also probably rely on the fact that the case took so long. I would say to a jury, the reason the case took this long is because there was doubt, because there was confusion, because they don't really know who did this. And now they're trying to scapegoat my client to show he's the one who did it because they have no one else to put this on. And, you just kind of work with reasonable doubt as best as you can in this case. And of course, the fact that he has supporters, maybe he's got some character witnesses. Maybe as a defense, you also try to keep out other prior bad acts, right? The calling in of the bomb threats, things like that, you're going to want to try to suppress so that a jury doesn't use that against your client.
Yeah, I think that stuff would definitely need to be suppressed if you were working on the defense, because it doesn't look too good for the defendant, I should say. Serena Townsend, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. My first episode back from the Diddy trial. I appreciate your time so much. Before we sign you off, though, what do you think is going to happen next in terms of what we could possibly expect from this trial, given that it's going to be a few months away?
First of all, welcome back. We are so happy to have you back on these episodes. And thank you for having me. I think that what we want to take a look at is, I think the prosecution is going to try to repair this situation. They're going to try to make a motion to the judge to add conditions to the bond release. Make sure that he's tracked, make sure that he is, monitored on some level, if not, asking for a higher bail, which I don't think they'll be successful doing. But I do think that there might be additional monitoring that happens. And then again, let's see what happens at trial. I do think that when, being out, he'll have a better opportunity to prepare for trial with his lawyers rather than trying to fight the case while incarcerated. So time will tell just how much this benefits him. But I do think the trial, if it does go to trial, would be very interesting to watch.
Oh, yeah. And we still have a couple months away, but it'll be very interesting to see if that case actually comes to trial or if there's possibly a plea that might be in the works. Who knows, right? Serena Townsend, again, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate seeing you.
Thank you. You too.
Gregory Moore's trial is scheduled to begin on March 30th of next year, 13 years after Aliza Sherman's murder. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.